Studying undisturbed sedimentary rock layers and the fossils within them reveals the relative age of rocks and fossils. The absolute age of rocks can be accurately measured by radiometric dating, which is based on the decay of radioactive isotopes and half-life.
4 billion years ago, the atmosphere contained no free oxygen. However, cyanobacteria, oxygen-generating organisms that form rock-like structures called stromatolites, provided free oxygen for the oceans and atmosphere. This high oxygen level made possible a rapid diversification of life on land and in the seas. The fossil record reveals the existence of species that have become extinct or have evolved into other species. Paleontologists have discovered many transitional forms that link older fossils to modern species. The fossil record also indicates that all the organisms alive today are only a tiny fraction of all the organisms that ever lived. In other words, most life that existed on Earth were extinct. Comparative anatomy. The study of different structures contributes to scientists' understanding of the evolution of anatomical structures of evolutionary relationships. Homologous structures have a common origin and reflect a common ancestry. Analogous structures have the same function. However, the similarity is superficial and reflects an adaptation to similar environments, not distinct from a recent common ancestor. Vestigial structures are common, structures are evolved.
Comparative biochemistry. Organisms that have a common ancestor will have a common biochemical pathway. The more closely related the organisms are to each other, the more similar their biochemistry is. Comparative embryology. Closely related organisms go through similar stages in their embryonic development. Molecular biology. A comparison of the amino acid sequence of the cytochrome C among different organisms shows which organisms are most closely related. Biogeography. Continents and oceans rest on giant plates of the Earth's crust that float on top of a hot mantle. About 250 million years ago, plate movement brought all the previously separated land masses together into one supercontinent called Pangaea.
Aristotle spoke for the ancient world with his theory of scala natura. According to this theory, all life forms can be arranged on a ladder of increasing complexity, each with its own allotted rung. The species are permanent and do not evolve. Lamarck was a contemporary of Darwin who also developed a theory of evolution. He published his theory in 1809, the year Darwin was born. His theory relies on the ideas of inheritance and acquired characteristics and use and disuse. He stated that individual organisms change in response to their environment.
By the early 1840s, Darwin had worked out his theory of natural selection or descent with modification as a mechanism for how populations evolve, but he did not publish them. Perhaps he was afraid of the controversy his theories would cause. Darwin's theory challenged the traditional view of a young Earth inhabited by unchanging species. Some qualifications of Darwin's theory of natural selection are: populations tend to grow exponentially, overpopulate, and exceed their resources. Second, overpopulation results in competition and a struggle for existence. Next, in a population, there is variation in an unequal ability of individuals to survive and reproduce. Only the best individuals survive and get to pass on the traits to offspring. Finally, evolution occurs as beneficial traits accumulate in a population.
Natural selection can alter the frequency of inherited traits in a population in 5 different ways, depending on which phenotypes in a population are favored. 5 types of selection are stabilizing, diversifying, directional, sexual, and artificial.
Stabilizing selection eliminates the extremes and favors the more common intermediate forms. Disruptive selection increases the extreme types in a population at the expense of intermediate forms. What may result in is called balanced polymorphism, one population divided into 2 distinct species. Over great lengths of time, disruptive selection may result in the formation of 2 new species. Directional selection occurs when one phenotype replaces another in a gene pool.
Sexual selection is selection based on variation in secondary sexual characteristics related to competing for and attracting mates. Artificial selection occurs when humans breed plants and animals by seeking individuals with desired traits as breeding stock. An example would be race horses or dogs. Variation in a population is necessary in order for a population to evolve as the environment changes. Balanced polymorphism is the presence of two or more phenotypically distinct forms of a trait in a single population of a species. Sexual reproduction provides variation due to the shuffling and recombination of alleles during meiosis and fertilization. Independent assortment of chromosomes during metaphase 1 results in the recombination of unlinked genes. Crossing over is the exchange of genetic material of homologous structures and occurs during meiosis 1. Outbreeding is the mating of organisms within one species that are not closely related. It is the opposite of interbreeding, the mating of closely related individuals. Diploidity, the 2N condition, maintains and hides a huge pool of alleles that may be harmful in the present environment, but that could be advantageous when conditions change in the future.
Heterozygote advantage preserves multiple alleles in a population. It is a phenomenon in which the hybrid individuals is selected for because it has a greater reproductive success. Frequency-dependent selection is another mechanism that preserves variety in a population. This acts to decrease the frequency of the more common phenotypes and increase the frequency of the less common ones.
The agents of change for a population, that is, those things that cause evolution, are genetic drift, gene flow, mutations, non-random mating, and natural selection. Genetic drift is change in the gene pool due to chance. It is the fluctuation in frequency of alleles from one generation to another and is unpredictable. It tends to limit diversity. There are two examples, the bottleneck effect and the founder effect. The bottleneck effect, natural disasters such as fire, earthquake, and floods reduce the size of a population unselectively, resulting in a loss of genetic variation. The resulting population is much smaller and not representative of the original one. The founder effect. The founder effect occurs when a small population breaks away from a larger one to colonize a new area. It is most likely not genetically representative of the original larger population. Rare alleles may be overrepresented.
Gene flow is the movement of alleles into or out of a population. It can occur as a result of the migration of fertile eggs, individuals, or gametes between populations. Mutations are changes in genetic material and are the raw material for evolutionary change. They increase diversity. Non-random mating. Individuals choose their mates for a specific reason. The selection of a mate serves to eliminate the less fit individuals. Natural selection. Natural selection is the major mechanism of evolution in any population. Those individuals who are better adapted in a particular environment exhibit better reproductive success. They have more offspring that survive and pass their genes onto more offspring.
Hardy and Weinberg, two scientists, described the characteristics of a stable, non-evolving population, that is, one in which allelic frequencies do not change. According to Hardy-Weinberg, if the population is stable, the following must be true. 1. Population must be very large. 2. The population must be isolated from other populations. 3. There must be no mutations in the population. 4. Mating must be random. And 5. No natural selection. The Hardy-Weinberg equation enables us to calculate frequencies of alleles in a population. The Hardy-Weinberg population is P plus Q equals 1.
Right at 10.
A species is defined in terms of reproductive isolation, meaning that one group of genes becomes isolated from another to begin a separate evolutionary history. Once separated, the two isolated populations may begin to diverge genetically under the pressure of different selective forces in different environments. If enough time elapses and differing selective forces are sufficiently great, the two populations may become so different that even if they were brought back together, interbreeding would not naturally occur. At this point, speciation is said to have taken place. Allopatric speciation is caused by geographic isolation, separation by mountain ranges, canyons, lakes, rivers, glaciers, altitude, or longitude. Sympatric speciation. Speciation may occur without geographic isolation, in which case the cause of the speciation is sympatric. Examples of sympatric speciation are polyploidy, habitat isolation, behavioral isolation, temporal isolation, and reproductive isolation.
Patterns of evolution. The evolution of different species is classified into 5 different patterns. First, divergent evolution occurs when a population becomes isolated, for any reason, from the rest of the species, and becomes exposed to new selective pressures and evolves into a new species. Second, convergent evolution. This is when unrelated species occupy the same environment, they are subjected to similar selective pressures and show similar adaptations. Third, parallel evolution. This describes two related species that have made similar evolutionary adaptations after their divergence from a common ancestor. 4. Coevolution. Coevolution is the reciprocal evolutionary set of adaptations of two interacting species. Finally, adaptative radiation. This is the emergence of numerous species from a common ancestors introduced into an environment.
The modern theory of evolution contains 2 theories. The first is gradualism. Gradualism is the theory that organisms descend from a common ancestor gradually over a long period of time in a linear or branching fashion. The second theory is punctuated equilibrium. This theory proposes that new species appear suddenly after long periods of status. A new species changes most of it as it buds from a parent species and then changes little for the rest of its existence. The sudden appearance of the new species can be explained by the allopatric model of speciation. A new species arises in a different place and expands its range, outcompeting and replacing the ancestral species.